Welcome back. Just now. I knew it was good to try to be nice. Go ahead.
All right. Oh, what time is the game?
I don't know.
The game is Saturday. 11. Which bus it is?
So, do I have any instructions for it?
Strategy. So.
Well, there's a usually things deal with it through the so they aren't directly. That's a great point. Yeah.
So you're expected to have.
Yeah, that's a real estate. But they just want to do it. But they want to say, well,
Regular body. Three more.
Yeah, he's a big one.
And I feel like this.
It's every meeting.
Right.
He'll do older lately, so for a while it was like, every meeting was like at least 2 hours. They're like, you get more hours.
That's a strategy. Everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do.
I'll reach out to them, I'll see if they're interested. If they are interested,
I'll come up. So that's how it's gonna go. We'll just get a picture. Sounds good. Okay. All right. Hey, Rob, you're out. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. It's all good. That's part of the job. How are you?
He just. On the back, so much nice.
Yeah, I hear you.
It is for downtown still, actually, the section is kind of
A little bit of like.
clear.
But it's still.
Yeah.
Do you see Kelly down?
Once in a
Oh,
while.
district.
You know, just take it around like this.
That would be ideal.
No, I don't think so. You can have multiple.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you've been doing some. You can speak, you're retired. My God.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Or one.
One granddaughter. Yeah, he's busy. I think he went out like.
They're moving.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, so they're like in our business.
Maybe. I know he went like on some trails down and then he went out like.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Anyways.
I don't know. My daughter from Colorado Springs, I was talking to the guy who just got a big bike and a high speed. So I thought, that's a challenge. Exactly.
I'm riding.
No, I don't think it is.
I, you know, I think.
I found it.
That guy. Oh, I think.
I got on
Yeah, he said it's been really dwindling on that morning ride.
Do they still ride?
I was working 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. tonight or whatever this is over. And then
It seems like it's always been a race. no matter what, so,
anytime
I
somebody
used to. That was
said it, where I was like, oh my God, I can't like the competition.
Not anymore. That was terrible. I
Devastating.
I kept it to, I kept it to get the bike. I got a little cross
So I'm like duty starting today.
but I'm thinking
Oh, good.
some of that.
You look
I
driving.
just, you know. They've got some awesome.
No, no, I never. Now 9 out of 10 drivers are cycling. When I'm running in the valley, and I'm running up my wife, she. Oh, yeah, I still, I go over to.
Yeah.
You know, it's a 50-mile ride.
It's how we don't change it. So you can see the perfection. I really want my hand.
Oh, that makes it 11.
All of our.
chapter. Because the various use. You asked me a question. Well,
She's coming.
Oh, sure.
you never know. Wait and see. Oh,
Well, we were.
oh,
I found it.
I think it's a great name. I do. Maybe I would come more often if I sat next to you.
As soon
That's
as
on your flip.
I do.
I'm gonna start having.
Do.
Yeah.
Next Tuesday.
I got on my calendar.
That was all the good ideas.
Yeah.
You missed Well, it's sometimes.
When I got here, there was that was like.
Yeah, especially for getting people all the way out in the country.
Yeah.
And you're back, you've been at 7. He got to socialize too.
Yeah, it's like.
Yeah. Gotta come back. The north, they enter our water. Nice guy. The inspector.
She goes one day on. I'm excited about it.
She's
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
So what has she been doing? Like, what is she? She's a marketing major or something. That creates more stamina than anything.
Yeah, exactly. The movies, yes. You're all right.
Right, I'm like, yeah, someday. So I would build it this way, soft it.
And then there is the office, if you stop by, you can. visit.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's pretty sure.
We'll walk over there Thursday.
Yeah.
been. That's
Huh, so we are your person about the. She said the light. Good. Can we be here? Yes,
So how many hours a week is she actually?
30 now.
30? So
Yeah.
she's at the office.
Yes, right now she's there. 9 to 9 to
And what's her name?
Baby Vermouth. She's the light. Great. We're excited. You must be excited. So over the top.
Is she ready for us to put suggestions? in the
She
book?
sure is. She is. I said, bring some new vision and excitement. She'll do great.
So she had this.
Yes, her in her late 20s, maybe 30s.
I called.
Yeah. She's
To
got.
be getting like what? Getting
And
like.
They showed up.
She worked at the chamber a few years back before she got married.
At our
During
chamber?
college, at our chamber. It's like,
So she knows Fremont.
yes, yeah. And she lives in Malmo, but and travels each day, but real active. She'll be at Halloween experience with the kiddos, so. that'll be fun.
How many kids does she have?
It's your girl. I said. She goes, it's like playing on vacation. And I said, well, that'll happen. That's no.
I had moms work for me and I'll say.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'll be
I'm here
back.
till 5.
I'll play mom's man up, right? That's great. She's alive. We had 3 really good kids.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Before we begin, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll open up the City Council regular meeting and call it to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Eight council members are present, Mayor.
Next on the agenda is mayor's comments. I don't have any comments tonight. So we'll move on to item 1. A motion to adopt current agenda for the October 12th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? Councilman Gibson?
I'll make that motion to accept
I,
if there are no.
are there any changes? If there's, I do have one. I would like to move up item number 11 in front of public hearings right after this item. Families here and just
With that adjustment, I will make the motion. to
Okay.
accept.
okay. Right, is there a second? Councilman Lake Band? Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion to move that item carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, and now I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councilman Jensen,
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Councilman Sukram,
Well,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, next item would be item 11. That's move to confirm appointment of Jesse Headed as police sergeant per mayor recommendation. So as you can see in the council packet, I again am tonight appointing Jesse Headed to be appointed as our police sergeant, and would take any questions. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I just have one question. It's pretty minor. I see in the packet material that the candidate lives in Cedar Bluffs, which was within the 20-mile radius required. The other candidate that's on here is listed as Omaha. Would that have also been in the 20-mile limit?
Yes, yep. And Adam was appointed a few meetings back already.
I realize that also within the 20-mile.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? Council? Take a motion to appoint Jesse Headed as police sergeant. Councilman Gibson?
I would make that motion to appoint Sergeant Headed to the police department.
Okay, Councilman Ligman? Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Before we move on this item, upon confirmation of Jesse's appointment tonight, he requested that we have a pinning ceremony during our council meeting. He is here with his dad, John Headed. John was hired as a patrol officer for the city of Fremont in 1996, and during his career with the Fremont Police Department, John served on the motorcycle patrol, the emergency response unit, the bicycle patrol, and was a field training officer. John Headed was promoted to sergeant in 2010 and retired from the Fremont Police Department in 2015. And so now tonight, John's son, Jesse, has been promoted to sergeant, and what a family tradition in Fremont law enforcement. So if John and Jesse would like to come up, we'll go ahead and do this. While a pinning ceremony is a ceremony to award and pin the police badge of an individual who has earned it and has been a long-standing law enforcement community tradition. There are 2 times a badge is presented to an officer. The first time is upon graduating from the police academy, and the second is upon being promoted. Both times are significant career accomplishments. Okay, Jesse, you want to repeat after me? I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska, and faithfully discharge all of the duties of my position here at the Fremont Police Department to the best of my abilities. So help me God. Congratulations. John, do you want to place the badge on your son? Very special. Thank you, family, for being here. Congratulations to Sergeant Headed. Okay, moving on to public hearings. Item 2, Ordinance 5588 to modify and continue business improvement district number 1 in the downtown. This would be for second reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. It's my privilege to recommend that we continue the BID for another 5 years. I think it's been a pleasure working with them. You know, it's been 5 years. They're still learning. We're still doing some great things downtown, and I think this opportunity to extend this another 5 years by partnering with Main Street is even better. We'll make it even stronger. as an organization to help downtown. So staff fully recommends that we move this forward. This is a budgeted item. We've already had this expense in our budget. And so simply it's just a formality to extend it for another 5 years. So, take any questions.
Any questions for staff? We'll now open up the public hearing. Any comments from the public?
I'm Pam Hopkins. I own a business in the Downtown Business Improvement District that's currently designated on Second Street between DMA and Hopkins Law Office. So a couple of questions. I just want to be clear that regarding the format here, am I allowed to ask questions and will I get answers?
No.
Okay. So one of the concerns that I have in regard to the proposed resolution compared to the previous 5-year contract with the Downtown Business Improvement District is that previously the Downtown Business Improvement District ordinance set out a specific cost taxing assessment for each of the businesses. And it set that by ordinance for each of 5 years and capped it at a certain amount after 5 years. It appears that the new ordinance does not do that and instead requires a new budgeting process in August of each year, rather than setting the cap across the 5-year time period. So the way the ordinance is written, as I understand it, it appears that the Business Improvement District can come up with whatever budget it wants, present it here to the city council, that you guys will probably pro forma approve it. And then those of us who are in the district will simply be allocated those assessments. Not having it clearly spelled out where the caps are and the fact that those are caps and that there's a maximum amount is troubling. One of my other comments in regard to this is that the budget for this year, for the next year, is about 35% higher than the budget was for last year. One of the other concerns that I have is that previously, the only exception for being allowed to not pay the Business Improvement District was if it was also being used for residential property. And in fact, the paperwork that would be sent out to us as businesses would say, do you use a certain percentage for residential property, et cetera? And that would then come off of that. Some process would be in place to probably shift those who are living in the property, the cost of the budget onto other people. I don't know how else it would work. Now there's language in there about the assessment being fair and equitable and being based on the benefit to the individual property owners. That is vague, to say the least. Because, for example, my business on Second Street between D and Main, I don't have any of the improvements that are part of the Downtown Business Improvement District. I don't have any of those things. And the nature of my business is not improved by increased foot traffic downtown. I think that the Business Improvement District is overly broad in its geographical layout because numerous businesses are included in that taxing or assessment district that do not benefit by foot traffic or improved downtown business. So for example, a law office, nobody's wandering around going, oh, I think I'll go see her at 7 o'clock at night or whatever it is. And then we have things like, well, and my understanding also is that there are numerous pieces of property that are included within the district that are purely residential property. So now we're talking about improving the 505 building, for example, and turning that into apartments. And if the exclusion is that if it's being used as living quarters, then one of the biggest buildings downtown is essentially not going to be assessed, which again, those of us who are on the fringes of the entity of the district and are not directly benefiting from that improvement are going to pay the costs associated with that. I'm also a bit troubled by the fact that this is the second reading on this agenda, and the hearing for this issue is before you guys on a second reading, not a first reading, and that your resolution already indicates that there's been no serious objection to the continuation of the Business Improvement District. Unfortunately, the Business Improvement District did not hold its own hearing and notify its own members of their ability to engage in a thoughtful discussion about the direction of the district, what its purpose is, what its overall goals are. So for example, when I see in minutes that you're going to close off, there's discussion about closing off Fifth Street. At the same time, you're opening up a new residential piece of property downtown and already hampering parking options. That's a little troubling. Spending $70,000 for a sound system downtown. For what? Thank you.
I'm Larry Marvin of 635 North Main Street. When I walk out my front door and look to the north, I see a US Bank vacant and parking lot vacant. When I look to the south, I see the vacant Buck Shoes store. I believe in teamwork and cooperation to achieve a better future. When I ask people if they notice any benefits from our BID, they are hesitant to say something or anything. When I ask about the flowers on the light poles and the Christmas decorations, they admit to seeing them. But how much value do they actually provide? I think that Perry's flowers at Kohlmeyer Building are much more noticeable and attractive. We owners can do our own Christmas decorating and planting of flowers. So the main purpose of the BID is to maintain our off-street parking. You still have not returned our parallel parking along Military Avenue. I got a new neighbor about 3 months ago, and they already have a for sale sign outside, if you haven't noticed. Also, the Eagles Club needs extra parking when they have funeral lunches and have 20 or 50 people come. During the daytime, the bank's parking lot is full. In the nighttime, they can use it. So talk to them. I did attend both information meetings of our BID, and I ate a free sandwich, which was from a 23rd Street vendor, not from a BID vendor. When I talk about buying local, I mean local, like buying from a BID vendor. I favor cutting our BID budget to $15,000 or 40% of last year's budget and extend the BID for another 5 years as a package deal. By the way, I have not heard any comments, good or bad, about the lighted sign at the corner of D and Military. But that should be public off-street parking for downtown shoppers and Eagle members attending activities. You refuse, number one, you refuse to accept free storage for the BID Christmas decorations. So we owners downtown shouldn't have to pay any taxes for the upper floors or the unrented space. Two, you have not replaced the parking. You can confiscate it along Military Avenue. Three, you bought sandwiches outside the BID district with our BID taxes. Four, when I ask a question at a BID meeting, you cannot answer me. You did not provide me with an agenda, and when I witnessed a board member state that he had an advertising contract and was only using half of it, you immediately purchased his obligation with our tax dollars. So I consider this conflict of interest and favoritism by those of you spending my tax dollars. Five, I do use off-street parking 1.5 blocks from my front door, so my tenants and their customers can park out front. That is the only real benefit that I and my tenants get from our BID. So I recommend that the BID budget is $15,000. Thank you. And I have a copy for each of you if you want to receive it to your records. And also I want to tell you, I wore this shirt tonight This is made by Imprint Design on the corner of Military and Main. And a year ago at a BID meeting, I asked if they were going to be painting the signs, and I hadn't heard about that. And so I said, did you give Imprint Design an opportunity to bid on that? And it was all blank faces. Nobody knows Imprint exists. And the last time I was in there, they have 4 employees and you don't know anything about them, and you hire outside work, just like the sandwich that I ate was outside. So that I just want to bring to your attention. So if you've never heard it before, now you have, and talk to the Eagles Club. Thank you. Did you want to receive these?
Sure. Councilman Yerger,
Motion to receive the documents.
Councilman Lakeman. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
In the paper, there should be 11.
Sure. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name's Tom Cody. My address is 2625 County Road 11. I'm also chairman of the BID. I'm going to put my posters out in front here, but I just wanted to share with you the BID was established in 2016. That began our first 5 years. And the budget is similar to the one that's on the board there. And there's an outline of what properties are in the BID. And there's a couple of changes in there. One is that the BID budget is a little larger this year than it was last year. And that's because we want to hire a part-time director and share that director with Main Street. And the reason for that is that we're all busy people trying to run businesses, and we don't have time to accomplish some of our goals without having somebody to follow up on the details. In order to do large projects, we need different partners. And I think that the Christmas decorations that we put up are a perfect example of the partnership between BID, Main Street, the Dodge County Convention Bureau, and the city. And it's not all a financial expenditure, but the city puts up the Christmas decorations and helps us store them from year to year. And that kind of cooperation is just exactly what we need. I think that that's one of our biggest accomplishments in the last 5 years is the increase in cooperation and partnership with other groups in the BID district. The budget actually is set up as a percent of the value of the levy. And so the reason it is reset every year in August is that the buildings have an opportunity to be revalued and include any updates that might have been implemented. And so to make this thing possible, it takes a little bit of money from a lot of different people in order to give us some seed money to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And we've got listed on the budget there at the bottom, you can see that it's figuring it at a 0.002 levy on the value of the building. On a $100,000 building, that would be $200 a year. It's not a significant amount. And the border that we have in the BID is the same border that was in the original DID formed in the 70s. And under the old DID, I'm with Lou's Sporting Goods, and we were paying $500 to the DID every year. And then with the BID coming on board, our payments dropped to $350. And so in our case, it was actually less money than the original DID that was based on the retail store square footage is how that tax was collected. And then as the laws changed, it would become uncollectible. And we got down to where we were only getting about $12,000 a year to work on maintenance projects in the downtown area. So we went and formed the BID, and that we started off at 0.0085, and then, I'm sorry, 0.00185. So it's a little less than what we've got figured on that board. And then as the building's values went up every August, we would take the levy. The dollar amount that we selected on this budget is locked in. And the budget we're proposing is $66,000. So that stays the same every year and can't change. But what does change is the contribution from each business. And so as the building values went up, the percent of the tax went down.
That's time.
I'm sorry.
That's time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Bob Missile, 427 North Birchwood Drive, resident here in Fremont, and also the property owner of 517 North Main, the building known as Union Block and houses Samter's Clothing today. I just am going to speak this evening as a property owner in the Downtown Improvement District and give my nod of support for the extension of the BID tax. I believe that the benefit certainly outweighs the cost. Number of years ago, Marty Schukert, the pretty famous now Omaha architect, spoke to a group of us and said that our downtown district offers our community a sense of place. And I believe that to be true. And I believe as a property owner, we need to be good stewards of our property. And the small investment that the BID board is seeking from us, I think in what they've shown they can do with those dollars is a great benefit to me as a property owner and to my community. And the efforts that they're doing, I believe, enhance the value of my property. So whether I'm a retailer or an attorney or a banker, if I'm a property owner in that district, I think we all benefit. So I ask for your support on this, and I thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel Check, 1649 North Maxwell, employee at Peterson Body Shop. I'm going to draw your attention to section 10B. It says there's going to be physical improvements in the BID, physical improvements downtown, whether it be murals, planters, sculptures, trees, grates, signs, banners, flags, benches, streetscapes, trash containers. Now, if many of you have been down D Street, I mean, I don't know how many of you probably even drive by my place of employment. But if you drive down there at Christmas time, we have Christmas decorations. Have we seen benches? No. Have we seen planters? No. Well, we see the hanging baskets. Do we see the See Shop Explorer signs? No. Where is the focus outside of Main Street? I see that there has been some stuff done on Park Street and Main. But if this BID is supposed to be for the entirety of downtown, there's businesses that they have excluded, whether because they have too large of a voice and said, no, we're not paying for it. I mean, you have Kelly Closures over on 3rd and H. You have Doll Auto on 4th and H. Those are excluded. Why are those excluded? And years ago, they were trying to get Larry Gitt down at his strip mall, but he's excluded. Is it because they've got a loud enough voice that they weren't taken, they were let go and let out of it? I know that Doll Auto Service had said, I'm not paying that tax and it's extortion tax. I'm not paying it just because I have a business down in the downtown. So did they just let him out of it? I don't know. But if we're going to continue to pay this, then I want to see improvements on my street in front of my business. There's plenty of D Street businesses that haven't seen improvements. So, and my question goes for the guys that are on the BID, where is my improvement? Pam hasn't seen any improvement. I haven't seen any improvement. And now a body shop that, if any of you know what it's like to try and hire somebody, try finding somebody in an auto repair. They aren't out there anymore. We're a dying breed. And my generation, most of them didn't go into physical labor jobs. So, thanks.
Any other comments?
Good evening. My name's Howard Krasny, 3219 Marion Lane. I own several properties downtown. I would consider myself as a main stakeholder downtown, or one of the main stakeholders downtown. I own property on Main Street, and I also own several properties off of the beaten path as well. I am very much in favor. Oh, by the way, I am a BID board member. I am very much in favor of moving the BID forward. I think it's very important for our district. I think it's important for our community. And I think it's very important for you as a council to support this movement, this BID movement going forward. I understand people's concerns that if it doesn't affect me directly, then I'm not being rewarded with what I'm putting in. But the fact of the matter is we're being rewarded indirectly. Those of us not on Main Street, we're still being rewarded indirectly. If people look at the value, their property values of 5 years ago, and they look at their property values now, they'll see a significant difference. And I think that speaks for what some of what we've accomplished as a BID. So personally, I'm very much in favor of it, and I hope the board is behind it as well. Thank you.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. It's interesting to note 2016 that this was approved and it was 0.00185. That was put as an assessment on each and every business in this district. It's also interesting to note that you also have a municipal code that binds how you perform with the BID. And it outlines some constraints. It's in your municipal code, chapter 10, section 7. It outlines some of that. It also is interesting to note that with this 35% increase in the ask, there has not been a justification. I did ask Mr. Code, if you recall, at the prior meeting, when you had presented your budget and you had the ask of 18,000 more, and your strategic planning had not been done. There's no capital improvement projects that are outlined. And then you did say that you planned on additionally helping to fund a shared position, which is noble because Main Street works in partnership with BID, which is good. But we also give money to Main Street separately. So you're asking for an additional $18,000 to do exactly what? I'm not sure, because your ask is very vague as far as what it outlines and what you're going to do with that additional money. 35% is a big increase. And when you're looking at an assessed value of 0.00185, it doesn't sound like much, but our valuations have gone up. Yes, it's 66,000. And yes, as Mr. Newton, for whatever reason, gave the staff report, who's not a member of the BID, but gave you a report for you. It was budgeted somewhat vaguely, and it was buried within your budget that you approved. Also, an interesting thing to note is that the BID avoids the lid limitations under state law. Has anyone checked with the state auditor as to whether or not this assessment is sufficient to the property tax lid? These are city expenses that are subject to the lid. Section 9A, clarifications that there is proposed an annual budget. Your budget is basically, this is what we think we want to use the money for, but it's not defined well. You were created in 2016. I think there's a place for BID. I think it's a good marriage between BID and Main Street. I'm not sure what you're asking that additional 35% for. It's not defined. And I did ask for that. And there was also others that asked for it at the meeting. You have also constraints in ordinances and how you ask. You need to be familiar with section 2 or chapter 2, section 3 of your own municipal code. It outlines how you can go about ordinances. This was passed as an ordinance. This BID, although loosely budgeted, has had meetings. You are bound by the same requirements in having be it an advisory board or your own taxable entity have to have permission to expend monies and expenditures in excess of $30,000. That's not only by our municipal code, that's also by state statute. And to say that this part that you're trying to push forward tonight isn't going to become part of our municipal code, I'm sorry, how can you do that? So really, how can you even continue discussion? How can you consider it tonight? Because you have done nothing to address chapter 10, section 7 of your Fremont Municipal Code. And that's something that you have to take in hand with this. This is buried in your municipal code. It's part of it. You can't just adopt this and then go against your own municipal code. $70,000 for a speaker system plus $5,000 to install it. That was a discussion in April. Main Street's going to help fund it as far as looking for outside funding. And any excess of dollars that have not been used up to this point, in the words of Chairman Code at the last meeting, we're going to be expended towards the speaker system. They've already looked at bids. Hasn't been presented to the council. That itself is another issue of concern. In order to expend the funds, it has to be presented to the council. That's not only by your municipal code, but it's also by the state statute, because it's in excess of $30,000. So the discussion had been had numerous times, but primarily lastly in August, and then also prior to that in July. No decision had been made, but the discussion had been had. Having the first reading was interesting without the public hearing.
It's time.
And take a look at what your packet contains and how loosely it is stated and what that asks for $18,000 is. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Vince O'Connor, 435 West 21st Street in Fremont. I'm also an owner of a store downtown. It's interesting to listen to some of the comments here, because some of the questions that were brought up were addressed at the public meetings that BID had in the last 2 months. Postcards were sent out, calls were made, and the first meeting we had 25 people, the second meeting we had 10. We addressed a lot of the questions that were up tonight. We addressed a lot of what the budget has. A couple other things. If you go back to the DID and how it evolved into the BID, and you looked at what has happened downtown, it takes time. 5 to 7 years ago, we all got new sidewalks. New poles were put in, some on D Street. Unfortunately, a lot of them haven't been finalized yet, but it takes time. The biggest thing, however, is what everybody is doing collectively downtown. Different organizations are trying to make it better. The last 2.5 years has hurt everybody, between the floods, between COVID, and what we're dealing with now. If we want to continue to move forward, we have to. The 505 building was brought up about the apartments. Nothing had been done in the 505 buildings for 15 years. Something's being done now. Change is the only thing that's constant. I strongly support what is being proposed here tonight. Get with it. Thank you.
Any other comments? We'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I just had a little bit here. Right now, I intend on supporting this. I believe in this. I do. There was a thing brought up though about as far as payment goes and benefit to individual property owners. There are some fringe properties that are within this district. I can think of one in particular. The owner got a hold of me. He is retired. The business is not, it's not a business anymore and never will be. And his question was if he would be included. I just have a question on some of the fringe properties within the BID. But other than that, I do support.
Any other comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem.
I think more of a question, and I don't know if legal answers it or who, but from Susan Jacobus, certainly talking about chapter 2, section 3 and chapter 10, section 7. Are we in compliance? Is BID complying when we increase that way?
As far as section 2, what do you, article 3, you're asking about whether the appropriation is appropriate? The appropriation was properly approved by the council. As far as amending chapter 10, article 7, I have to look at the ordinance as written. We should reference that section of the code. And I'll make some changes before the third reading as to how we will be amending or eliminating those other sections so that this new ordinance will replace the prior sections.
Councilman Yerger.
My questions kind of go along the same way. And I guess I'd just like to start out by saying, I generally support the concept of a business improvement district. I think a board can and should play a critical role in downtown redevelopment and revitalization. I think that kind of goes without saying, but in order to do so, as a council member, I feel we ought to be being presented and be able to see some sort of preparation and articulation of strategic vision with regards to short and long range plan for achieving some goals. You know, when I think of business improvement, largely I think of things like, how would we emulate Omaha Old Market? Or how would we emulate Lincoln Haymarket? And is that part of what falls under the purview of the BID with regards to some of the tasks that are set forth in city code for them being in existence? I think they do, in my opinion. I'm not sure whether legal would agree, but my vision for Fremont downtown goes to that when I think about how do we improve and revitalize downtown. Some of the other amenities are great, but long-range plan, strategic, and if we're going to spend money, that's the critical aspect for me. I am also troubled about what we're looking at in our packet tonight with Ordinance 5588 specifically, and municipal code section 10700, and the fact that we are not doing anything in regards to what we have before us tonight in addressing section 10700, specifically the section that deals with, excuse me, 10711, that deals with the amount of budget, as one of the members of the public acknowledged, that this is specifically spelled out as a part of city code. Yes, we're here to discuss whether or not we'll continue for another 5 years, the BID, but also encapsulating how much we're going to spend and over that 5-year period, what that lockdown would be. That's in code, and we're not addressing that. We didn't bring it at the first reading. We didn't discuss it here. And I thought at the last meeting, we were told that we were going to get some sort of a presentation, if you will, about the change in the budget from the 48,000 to the 68,000 and the strategic vision specifically that might play into the discussion I just brought up about Old Market and Haymarket and how, you know, we can effectively utilize the character of Fremont to go down that road. And I'm troubled that we didn't get that tonight because I thought we were told that we would get that. But the biggest issue for me is I don't think we're doing in tandem what we need to do. And legal, I'm sure if you take a quick look at 1110, section 711, it will definitely be out of compliance should we take action on anything regarding this. And much of the language that's contained in this ordinance is contained in the other paragraphs of section 10, 706 to 714. So it seems to be a repeated. It's not to be a substitute. And when I read section 22 of this, as was brought out by the public as well, it says, well, this is not going to be encapsulated in city code. Well, my goodness, it has to be encapsulated in city code, and the budget that we intend to approve or is going to be spent and used to make assessments is currently encapsulated in city code and needs to be. And so that the fact that these aren't coming in tandem, I think is procedurally incorrect. As a result of that, I think this needs to be continued until those kinds of things happen. One, we see the strategic vision plan for the extra spend that's being asked for. And two, to make sure that we have the city code modifications that go hand in glove with what we're attempting to do here when we're extending the duration of the BID for another 5 years. They go hand in glove. And one is definitely absent. And they should have been presented, I think, at least in tandem or at least two following agenda items, if not totally together. So I make a motion to continue this item until that's resolved. It can be at the next meeting, or if it takes longer than that, that's fine. But I don't think we should be doing second reading on something that's not in compliance with city code, because we need to fix the city code in tandem with what we're doing here. So I make a motion to continue this item to at least the next meeting. Longer if necessary by staff.
Mayor, if I may, as I mentioned to Councilmember Gainem, I can have the references to section 10 cleaned up since the BID the term did expire. We just got to implement the new changes into section 10, and whether it's included in the code book, that's up to council to decide whether you replace section 10 or eliminate it altogether with this new ordinance.
Councilman Ligdan.
Yes, so if we move forward with this, you'd feel comfortable moving to second reading today and next time third reading and have the amendments. Well, I'm in favor of this because we keep talking about we need to improve downtown. Here,
it is a motion to table.
Okay.
Councilman Ellis.
I'm going to second that motion because of the fact that what's sitting in front of us is not an ordinance. If the council wants to look at an ordinance, look at the next agenda item.
5591. That defines what an ordinance is. We are changing municipal code. And when you change municipal code, you give the code with line items of what's being changed. This right here, I can't even believe that we voted on it last week because it's not an ordinance. It's purely not in the ordinance format. It doesn't match any other ordinance that we've done. And then the very last section, section 22, there is no sections in ordinances. There are, but it states here that this ordinance shall not be included in the Fremont Code book. What the heck does that mean? This is an ordinance. This ordinance changes municipal code. Why would we put in this ordinance that we're looking at that it would not be included in the Fremont City Code? So there's a lot of mistakes. I'm not sure where this came from, but this is not the format of an ordinance that we normally vote on. We normally vote on an item that has line item changes, that we are going to change this sentence to this. We're going to change this to this. So for us to have this ordinance sitting in front of us, I am embarrassed that I voted on this last time. I voted no on it for other reasons, but for us to be voting on this tonight is actually wrong. And so that's why I would continue this until the ordinance gets modified properly to maintain our integrity of our municipal code and our processes that we have in place in changing our municipal code. That is why I vote yes for continuance.
Cast your votes.
Motion fails 3-5.
Okay. Take a motion to hold second reading. Councilman Legband,
I make a motion to hold second reading with the understanding that we'll look at it, make the proper adjustments and move forward so we can help build the downtown. All work together.
Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that motion.
cast your votes.
Whoa, gonna have discussion?
There was a motion and a second.
I'd like to make an amendment.
That's too late. There was a motion and a second.
I appealed legal counsel. When do you make amendments to a motion on the floor?
When you make motion, we can't ever talk about it.
Well, motion was raised and seconded. And you want to make an amendment now?
Would like to. I'd just like to add something to the motion.
So generally, the item for discussion isn't even on the floor until it's motion and seconded. So if you want to amend it, we would handle the amendment first and then go back to the original motion.
Okay.
So
Be up to Councilmember Lakeman to amend his motion if he prefers.
So there's already been a motion in a second. So now if there's another amendment, we vote on that first. What's your amendment?
I'd like to amend Councilmember Legband's motion to include further discussion and presentation by the BID with regards to the strategic plan that supports increasing 48,000 to 68,000 budget. We haven't yet heard that. We're now on second reading. It certainly would be appropriate to bring it for discussion at third reading. That's my amendment.
Councilman Ellis.
I second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Cast your votes to amend. Okay. You ready? Okay. Cast your vote to amend.
Motion fails 2-6.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Ready? Cast your votes. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2.
Now have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska to continue the existence and authority of the Fremont Business Improvement District Number 1, establishing the purpose for such district, providing that real property within the district shall be subject to special assessments, describing the boundaries of Fremont Business Improvement District Number 1, establishing the proposed method of assessment to be imposed within the district, providing for penalties for failure to pay special assessments, repealing ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing for severability, and providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on second reading.
Moving on to item 3, ordinance 5591 to amend section 11-405 of the Unified Development Code regarding floodway overlay and flood fringe overlay districts. This would be for first reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. In front of you tonight are some proposed changes to our floodway and flood-prone district language. These have been requested by the staff from the community rating system. The community rating system evaluates us for floodplain insurance, or they evaluate our building codes, they evaluate a number of other things. And the benefit of that is that it helps reduce our premiums for flood insurance. And the more check marks essentially we get, the better of a discount we get. When it was currently reviewed this last spring, the individual wanted a few tweaks to the language. I think it's mostly semantic. They are asking, instead of saying 1 foot above the base flood elevation, that we provide a 1 foot freeboard for the floodplain, which is essentially the same thing. But they've asked for those changes. The state has approved those changes. We also specified the new dates for the flood insurance rate maps. And again, these have been approved by the State Department of Natural Resources. The Planning Commission recommended approval, and I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
There's probably, I don't know whether to even ask this question, but you brought up the, basically the definition of freeboard and what we have today are essentially the same thing. They prefer one set of terms over another. They are essentially this, I mean, more than essentially, they are the same. I mean, we're not raising the height or anything. We're just changing the wording.
We're
to say the
just,
same thing.
it's semantic. We're changing the wording. When I talked with the state about it, and Don and I talked about it, we all thought that it said the same thing as what the CRS individual wanted, but we want to maintain our flood insurance.
Sure.
And so that's important. We want to keep our rating. We want to improve our rating. So we're just happy to do this.
Yeah, and I
That's
understand
what
why
makes
you would
more
do that.
sense.
So then my next question would go to legal for the same thing. Changing the terminology in that regard to the extent that it doesn't have any effect, it may be more succinct for purposes of enforcement and insurance. So it's a good thing, I'm assuming you would say.
It would create an extra basis of defining the term.
More succinct. in some
I would suppose so. It would be a secondary source, but you could utilize it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Jensen?
Since this appears to be a pretty bread and butter thing, is there a reason you don't want to go to third reading right away and get this off our board?
Oh, I would be very happy if you would be willing to do that.
Okay, any other questions? Any comments from the public? Seeing. Oh, thank you. We'll officially open the public hearing of ordinance 5591. Any comments from the public? We'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Seeing none, Councilman Leggman?
Seeing none, I'd like to recommend holding first reading of ordinance 5591.
Councilman Gibson?
Second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
And legal, just to make sure, even though we didn't note in the item that we are moving to suspend, it's still okay, right?
Yep, it's still an option.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Jensen,
Yes, I'd like to move to suspend the rules and move ordinance 5591 to third and final reading.
is there a second? Councilman Gibson,
I'll second that.
okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Now have final reading. We have first reading.
I believe
Do we have first reading?
I'll do first and then
Can we do first and then final right now?
Okay.
We'll have first reading.
an ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, zoning subdivision and site development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability and providing an effective date on first reading. Okay.
Final reading.
Final reading, an ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC, Chapter 11, zoning subdivision and site development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability and providing effective date on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by either council, staff, or the public? Councilman Yurger.
I have some questions on items 7 and 8, please.
Go ahead.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. I would like to have number 4 taken off for discussion.
There's no other items. I would take a motion to approve consent agenda item 5, 6, 9, and 10. Councilman Jensen,
I'll make that motion.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes. Councilman Sukram, can you please? Oh, thank you.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 4, motion to approve September 29, 2021 through October 2021 claims and authorized checks to be drawn on proper accounts. Any report from, go ahead, Jody.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. The claims are before you this evening and you received them via email earlier on last Thursday, and I responded to some questions by a council member.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. I did have a few comments and an area of concern, nothing earth shattering. Again, you are being asked to approve almost $16,000 in merchant solutions for your credit card services for those that choose to pay their bill online and use their credit cards, et cetera. That is a cost that is passed on to the ratepayers, which there are roughly 11,000 ratepayers. So that basically comes down to $17 a ratepayer every year, which would have taken care of the increases on their meters for the last 3 years that was approved for, because you increased some of the metering costs, the hard costs on the billings that went out. So just, we're still not accosting and having those that utilize this service take this into account on their own. Some areas and smaller businesses inclusive charge a percentage over and above the cost of the item in order to use those services. And that was supposedly going to be looked at 3 years ago and 2 years ago, and it came up again. And I know Jody's tired of hearing it, but she knows I bring it up every year. So thank you for bearing with me, Jody. On Also, one of the areas of concern, I noticed that your legal fees have gone up again. For the past 2 months, last month and this month, you'll be just shy of $100,000. That's not chump change. On track with that, it looks like you could end up with the $600,000 budget item for an attorney that's here on Tuesdays and available by phone, but not in-house attorney. This was a move that was to save money. And yes, it's budgeted and you budgeted $750,000, but you also still continue to have outside legal consulting. And last but not least, I wasn't aware that your Keno funding had gone over from October, from the end of September into the new fiscal year. And I noticed that the Keno payouts on here for the different grants, 12,000 to CATS and the community foundation, et cetera, bled over into this year. And so I just wondered why that was, why that wasn't paid in September, being a payout, or if this was something that is just routinely done that way. And that's something that I'm sure Jody can answer, but that was my questions. And those are my concerns. Thank you.
Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
Well, after listening to what was just said, I do have a couple of follow-ups. I would be interested in knowing where we stand relative to looking, because I remember this as well, about looking into recoupment of the costs associated with what it costs us to do credit card usage. And I know we said we were going to look into that, and I don't remember if we did and we got an answer, or we're still in the process of looking. But if that could be funded by those people that want to use credit cards rather than by general taxpayer, that would be a plus. So have we looked into that and decided it was worth doing, or we haven't looked into it? What's the status?
So the status is that we have looked at it. For the amount that we collect each month, the charge that that you see on a percentage basis is about 1%. And $11,000, while that sounds like a lot of money, and I agree that it does. The idea is that we are trying to encourage people. We're looking at trying to get people to spend more time on their computer working with us, as opposed to coming in and taking the time of the folks downstairs to be recording all of those transactions. And so that the idea of passing that on, especially because it's 1%, the decision was made not to pursue that. As we went through working with Paymentus, the decision was that we would continue to absorb those fees.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The other one that I was interested in was when you have Keno grants being paid out, and I know one of the answers that we got was, well, what needed to be done, completed by September. So as a part of their Keno grant, are they, and I didn't look these things up, are they required to go and complete certain things with regards to the grant within a certain time frame, or they don't get paid, they get paid after the fact, rather than they get paid up front? Is it like a proof of completion that needed to be done by the end of September, and that's why it carries over into October? Because they had till the last day of the month of September, therefore we couldn't pay till we had proof of completion?
That is correct. They have to turn in a report to the grant coordinator to confirm that whatever it is they thought they were going to be spending money on, they provide copies of invoices to substantiate at least. Most of them in their own spending actually went over, but we looked at the resolutions and were constrained by those resolutions to only pay the amount that was provided for in the resolution. If it was less, and I seem to remember one of them was less, that's because they didn't spend the total amount. The grant is a 50-50 split. And the grant periods, we have two, one that happens right away in October and then another one in April, that both groups have until September 30th to get their projects done. We will take this expense back into the prior year.
That was my next question. So thank you for clarifying that in advance. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ganem.
No, again, I just want to point out with the legal fees we talk about, it was 28% on public record requests. And again, it was almost a fourth of that cost again this month. And so I know I've made a request to take a look, just to look, because I wondered if it was legal issues going on, if it's just people requesting, because then we could address that possibly.
Councilman Ellis.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. We're running a $58,000 bill right now on public request. It's a lot of money being spent because the citizens don't trust us. It could be citizens, it could be companies, it could be anybody around the world submitting a request into the city.
But it could also be any legal issues that we have, or city being sued, the other lawyers may be asking. So I just think I was just requesting that I be able to look at that, because then we could at least address it. Because it may not be public that they don't trust us. It may not be that. It might be us. I'm not sure. We will find out.
There's no other comments. I'd take a motion to approve. Councilman Legband,
Make a motion to approve.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 7, motion to accept 2-year maintenance contract with Flabrico Company for maintenance of heating and cooling equipment at the police department. This time we'll have staff report. Chief Elliott.
Good evening, Jeff Elliott, Chief of Police. What you're looking at is a request to have a maintenance agreement with Flabrico for the HVAC system maintenance. There were 3 companies that were quoted, and Flabrico was the cheapest. So I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Yerger.
I don't have a question for Chief. I do realize y'all need air conditioning over there on a regular basis and didn't have it a lot last year. So I understand the need. My question is for legal with regards to the agreement, and in the terms of agreement, it says that this is a 2-year agreement and it renews annually with price increases, et cetera. And then two paragraphs down, it says cancellation of the agreement can be done by either party within 30 days notice. So my question is, can the contract be terminated within 30 days notice or only on the anniversary date of the contract renewal with 30 days notice? And the reason I'm trying to get some clarity there is we're anticipating in doing some police department building, building something new, which might negate this contract within the time period. And can we cancel this on any month at any time with 30 days notice rather than we don't have to wait for annual renewal times? I just wanted to be clear.
Yep, it's canceled within 30 days notice by either party, so they could cancel it as well.
At any time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? I would take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Gibson,
I would make the motion to accept the contract.
Councilman Legband,
I'll second that.
cast your votes. Councilman Yerger, we're waiting on your vote.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 8, resolution 2021-148, approving outside fire contracts from November 1, 2021 to October 31st, 2022. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, this for outside fire contracts. These businesses are on the south side of town, outside the city limits. The accounting department puts together a spreadsheet for me for which they will be receiving a charge in the amount equal to as if they were in the city limits paying property taxes. And so they've provided that information to me. I've provided a sample contract and the resolution which outlines the amount that each entity would be responsible for. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilman Yerger.
No questions for Tyler, but I do have another question for legal along the same lines as my question on the previous item. In this agreement, in the next to the last paragraph, it's understood that upon giving notice, we can cancel the contract. Doesn't specify how much notice we have to give. Is that of any concern? That is, it doesn't say 30 days. It could be instantaneous. Can it be instantaneous?
You can cancel it upon giving notice. You just have to notify of cancellation.
So it could be instantaneous. I mean, receipt of letter, it's terminated.
Yes.
Okay, and that doesn't need to be stated. It's clear enough with regards to the fact that it's not stated, that it's just automatically can be at will.
Certainly upon cancellation, it can be. The only issue would be if there's an ongoing, I guess, performance, we would just owe that amount, but I don't foresee that happening.
So you're okay with, the language? is it?
Yes.
Okay, and the reason, I just wanted to state this, I see this particular item is accompanied by, is the contract, and it's accompanied by a resolution. And my concern in late voting on the last item, it didn't have a resolution. I think this is appropriately stated. It's a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign this agreement. We should have had the same on the previous item, but at least it's here for this one.
Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
If not, I make a motion to approve resolution 2021-148.
Councilman Sukram. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to new business. Item 12, ordinance 5592 to sell a tech park lot to Boulevard Boys Properties LLC. This would be for first reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. This is a draft to first reading to sell a piece of property that originally was spoken for by Cleary Landscaping. Cleary decided to go somewhere else. Tyler Thomas, that one of the co-owners of Boulevard Boys, had originally spoke for the lot on the south side of 29th Street. But when this one came open, he decided to move to the north side, which is probably a good idea, a little better sun. And so he's offered to purchase this lot. If you look, it's our standard purchase agreement. The only difference is that I've taken out the section in there about the refund. So this is just a plain $32,000 per acre for the 3.08 acres. So with that, the rest of it reads the same. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
And the applicant is here.
Councilman Yerger.
So I have a few questions, I guess. The agreement itself in subparagraph 3 states the value at 96,200. And the ordinance itself listed at $100,100. I'm assuming it's because paragraph 3A isn't specific enough to recognize there's slightly more than 3 acres, which is reflected in the ordinance. But since we know that, couldn't and shouldn't they be reflective of the same values? Sounds like we don't have to do any work in that regard to figure that out. With regards to the $32,000 price, I'd like to resurrect my discussion that we had many meetings ago, and I think the value has gone up even more. I'm appreciative of the fact that we continue to raise the price from 20 to 25 to now we're at 32. But back when we were presented with the cost of Tech Park property to the citizens of Fremont, it was told to us at some point, we were at least at either 40 or just under $50,000 a lot, or maybe as high as $73,500 a lot. And that was before we spent an additional $1 million on 29th Street work that wasn't originally anticipated, which would add additional cost to that. So we're still selling for substantially less than what the citizens of Fremont have invested in that property, which continues to trouble me. With regards to other questions, I want to ask legal because I've raised this on others as well. Subparagraph B of section 3 talks about earnest money. And we lost earnest money for failure to have a signed contract, and so they walked away giving the city nothing. I'm wondering why the paragraphs on earnest money don't require some sort of, what is our signal for when we ever get to collect? In this contract, what would it take for us to ever collect earnest money?
Once the agreement's signed.
And so if they never sign, we never get to collect. They could hold out on signing this for who knows how long because there's no date certain for when they have to sign.
Correct.
That seems to be sort of problematic for not just this sale, for any sale that we make that is so open-ended. We have no assurance that anyone will ever sign, and therefore the property is being withheld for sale. And we can't collect any earnest money because they didn't sign. That just doesn't seem to be good contracting from my perspective. Typically, you have a certain amount of time if you're buying residential property, and we talked about this the last time, that perhaps businesses need more due diligence time to do their work. I'm amenable to that, I understand, but should it be forever? I mean, couldn't our contracts have some sort of time frame that says if you don't sign by sometime down the road, this contract for the city, the offer by the city is void?
We could do
Therefore-
that or rescind the offer by approving another purchaser.
So I just think our contracts are kind of weak in that regard. The people that are buying are probably going to fulfill, so it's probably a non-issue. But the point is, we lost earnest money on something else because we didn't have that. They hadn't signed and we didn't get anything. Yet we had that property held for sale. So I'm troubled by that. I wish that we could put more into that particular paragraph to deal with that. And what, can you remind me what you indicated was the appropriate due diligence that might be acceptable? I mean, it's probably not the same as you would buy as a residential property. These are more complex. Can you remind me what you told me at the last time I asked?
For a due diligence period?
Yes. So what would be the appropriate time frame that you would extend an agreement to somebody to purchase?
Between purchase and closing,
Yes.
40 to 60 days is usually.
So if they haven't signed in 2 months, we could put something like that in there with regards to earnest money is forfeited if it hasn't closed within 2 months.
Well, I'd hope the earnest money would be paid before that when they sign the purchase.
Well, we'd
agreement.
want the earnest money up front, but the
Yep.
point is, we don't have any way to collect on it until we have a date certain of which you haven't signed, and therefore the money becomes the city's.
That's correct.
And I guess my admonition is, I would feel a lot more comfortable, not on this, just on this contract,
Mhm.
but in all contracts where the city has property and we're negotiating on behalf of the citizens of Fremont, that we ought to be able to collect. I'm not suggesting that these folks will default in any way. I'm just thinking our contracts ought to be more succinct. And I would look to you to make sure that we get those things incorporated.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So we have to publish for the remonstrance period?
Yeah.
And so would the contract need to be signed after that because there could
Yes.
potentially be public?
It's 40 to 60 days after the remonstrance. period.
After the remonstrance period.
You have 15 days to ordinance, and then you got 30 days.
Okay.
So all total, how much is that?
45.
45 on top of the 60?
Yes.
Yes.
And that remonstrance period is just to petition a challenge for it. That's required by statute.
Okay. Would you at least agree that something more succinct relative to the collection of earnest money? This paragraph would seem to give the citizens basically no protection. We have something in here. You may have to put something up, but we have no assurance we'll ever get it.
If the council wants to put a date certain on when the contract has to be signed, we could try to put that in there. I don't know if the purchaser would agree to the agreement still, but if that's something we could look at adding. Also, at the same time, the city has the right to pick a new purchaser up until the point when this is signed. So
I would ask that we at least approach the purchaser and see if they're willing to have something amended in that. And we should, if so, we should incorporate that on a going forward basis for any future lots sold. So I would ask that before we get to second reading, we at least look into that and see whether or not we can tighten that up.
Councilman Legban.
Some of the things that we times we haven't got our earnest money has been our fault. How many times have we stopped these sales to look at these lots and argue it and argue it and argue it and haggle over this and that and the other thing? So half the time, probably not half the time, if there's been a delay on this projects, it's been our fault. So now to penalize and ask for more earnest money, I don't think that's right. Going forward, maybe it's something to look into, because now it's platted and ready to go. I could look into that, but how many times have we've lost people because we're the ones dragging our feet in this, not them. They wanted to start building. We wouldn't let them. Now, finally, we have some plats. Maybe they can come in and start building.
Any comments from the public?
Tyler Thomas, 2157 North Summers. I am half of the Boulevard Boys properties, together with Mark Clausen and myself. We own that. Also own TNT Electric, started that in 2004. Basically started out of my garage at that time, and we've grown to 4 full-time employees, myself and 2 part-time employees. Mark's business has been in the Fremont community since 1976 when his dad started it. We do most of our work around here. We're just simply out of space where we're at. We're on Summer Street right now. We're in the old Einspar construction building. We don't have any room for employee parking. We don't have any room to put vans inside. When we bought those 3 or 4 years ago, we thought we'd have all kinds of room, and now the construction market's crazy, as everybody knows, and we're out of space. So these lots come available. They're reasonably priced. We'd like to make a pretty decent commitment to the community and put up a decent size, probably a 10,000 square foot building, just to try to get everything under one roof. So that's kind of where we're at. We're not asking for any tax incentives or LB 840 money, just looking for a place that we can grow and keep doing business in Fremont. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street. A point was made about the earnest deposit money and the time frame to sign a contract. We have lost money, not because of indecision or taking too much time to decide to close the deal. RTG Medical comes to mind. There was a backdoor deal made that they didn't get the deposit made and we weren't going to have them pay it. And there's an agreement without coming back to the council after the council had accepted the contract. That said, you need to have a time frame, because this is a good group of guys. They're going to continue to do business in Fremont, and they've got a good contract in front of them. And they have no intent of backing out and going elsewhere, but you're always going to have that risk. Not necessarily with this contract, but with future contracts, you have to consider putting some time limits on there and actually having your administration collect that deposit and have it on the tab. This is a good contract. They're going to put up a good structure. They've been in business in Fremont for a fair amount of years. Location will be ideal for them. But again, the contract itself lacks some of that content that's needed. Would you buy a house or sell your house to somebody and not require them to sign the contract, because you're going to keep it kind of open and have them be at risk? They could walk away, but yet you might wait and dangle that carrot and maybe sell to somebody else. Is that how you buy a home? Is that how you sell your home? I don't think so. When I first moved to Fremont and got in a bidding war on houses that I had locked in and paid my deposit, I had to fight and almost had to go to court against a very local, supposed respected, who owned the town, to get my money back, because it sold out from underneath us after we had sold and got deposit. That's no protection for these guys or for anybody else. But you need to also do the right thing for the city and for the taxpayers. You shouldn't have an open-ended contract.
Any additional comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem?
Now I see going forward, that would be a good consideration for future contracts to be included in some type of time frame. And hearing no other comments, though, I would move that we have first reading for ordinance 5592 to South Park Block to Boulevard Boys Properties.
Councilman Jensen,
I will make that second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to Boulevard Boy Properties LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on first reading.
Moving on to item 13, resolution 2021-150, authorizing the mayor to sign contract with Navajo Transitional Energy Company to purchase contract coal for 2022 and 2023. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Lundy Wright Power Plant. We went out for bids for coal to the suppliers that are fed by, or that are connected to the Union Pacific Railroad. We received 2 bids back. One was from Navajo Transitional Energy Company and one was from Arch Coal Sales. We evaluated the bids and decided on Navajo Transitional, and it will be for 22 and 23. The coal is virtually the same on BTUs. Navajo's gave us a quantity which is based on Fremont's demand. And Arch basically said we had to choose the quantity we were going to take plus or minus 1 train. After that, it'd be at spot price. And with gas prices the way they are, we didn't want to be subject to that kind of price increase. So we chose the Navajo.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'd like to offer an amendment to the resolution. The resolutions now be it therefore resolved statement to include actually what we're buying. I know it's stated in the whereas above, but the ordering paragraph, as we've discussed in previous meetings, is essentially what we're approving. So after the statement in that last paragraph that says CY 2022 and 23, I'd like to insert for a nominal 8,800 BTU supply of ultra low sulfur coal for Lundy Wright Power Plant. This states what we're actually buying. I'm getting a head nod from staff, so I'm assuming that you don't have any objections to that.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a second to the amendment? Councilman Ellis,
Second the amendment.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1.
Now I take a motion to approve resolution 2021-151. No, 2021-150 as amended. Councilman Yerger.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2021-150 as amended.
Councilman Legband,
Second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 14, resolution 2021-151, authorizing owners engineering services for EPA effluent limitations guidelines, ELG rule for Lundy Wright Power Plant, Unit 8. Go ahead, Jeff.
Mayor, City Council, Jeff Shanahan, Lundy Wright Power Plant. This is for engineering services to create an EPC contract or specification to go out for bids for an EPC contractor to install the conveying system for the effluent limitation guidelines rule that we're required to comply with by December 31st, 2023. We went out for bids. We received 3 bids back. One bidder or one company did not bid. One listed their price as proprietary, the other two are listed. We reviewed the bids and chose HDR.
Any questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the third whereas statement in this particular resolution to begin that paragraph by saying this item is being submitted to council without UIB recommendation or approval, and then continue on with what staff has asked for the rationale.
UIB met tonight. UIB met tonight and approved it 5-0.
Yeah, it was a lot of these things right now, we're having trouble with people committing to pricing and getting equipment. We went to UIB tonight and it was approved 5-0.
Yeah, and we explained we can't wait because the price is locked in. If we wait 3 weeks for the next council meeting, they won't honor it. So
I understand, but we've had discussion about UIB meeting on the same day as us, and their meeting votes are not memorialized in minutes that are published yet for the record. So the best way to clean this up, and we've been cleaning them up for quite some time, is to not make reference to what they have accomplished or may have accomplished today. The clarification, I think, is appropriate. That is, this technically, from our perspective, is going through without a UIB recommendation for approval because we have no minutes to put in the record.
It does say it was submitted prior to the UIB meeting.
I prefer the language I offered. My amendment to the whereas statement stands.
Is there a second to the amendment? Motion dies for lack of second. Take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Gibson,
So moved.
Councilman Legband, Burn, thank you.
I will second that for the resolution 2021-151.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 15, resolution 2021-152, authorizing staff to sign a contract for propane peak shaving system modification to Utility Energy Systems LLC. This time we'll have staff report.
For Shaven Assistant City Administrator Utilities. The city owns a propane peak shaving plant on Pierce Street. I don't know how many of the council members know that. It's on 401 North Pierce. If you recall, during the polar vortex last year, what that station does is it injects propane into our natural gas system. It allows us to offset some of the natural gas that we would have to purchase from the market, or if there are penalties, it allows us to avoid penalties from overdoing the amount of gas that we use during really cold spells. That peak shaving plant last year ran 4 days. It saved us in the neighborhood of about $1 million. It was not designed to run for 4 days. It was designed to run for a day here, a day there. The plant itself is about 50 years old. We've been evaluating the plant, trying to piecemeal it together to get it through another year. After discussing it with 2 or 3 vendors, we decided that that's not the way to go. The best way is to replace all of the important parts. We went out for bids. There was one bidder. We got one bidder, but his bid was very close to the amount that we budgeted based on conversations with 3 other vendors. Similar to the prior item, we're kind of trying to get this built before winter. The contract states that they'll have the system running throughout the whole winter and replace parts as needed. So it did go to the UIB this afternoon. It was passed 5-0. The contract, I believe, states that there's a potential cost savings based on fire code. What we spec'd out were gas tanks that were had fire protection on them. talking to the contractor, he has actually gotten tanks approved in the state of Nebraska without that fire coating on them. That could save us in the neighborhood of $440,000. What we're doing is we're coming forward with the full $1.7, $1,780,000, or $1,750,000, $1,780,000, knowing that that should be the maximum amount, and it could very well be lessened by $440,000. I can take any questions.
Any questions? Councilman Ellis.
You just got me mesmerized as far as we actually inject propane into the natural gas lines.
Yes, it's shaving. It's a small amount. It's about 1,000 MMBTU a day. During the winter, we use about 20,000 MMBTU a day. So it's in the 5% range. If we were to do it in the summer, we haven't had to do it in the summer. It would be, I suppose that's 25% of our daily usage in the summer. This is to replace this section. This actually adds 2 larger tanks as well. So this will increase our capacity about 40%. So we'll be able to do more than 1,000 per day. And then in the long-term capital plan, not in the next 2 years, but years down the road, or 3 or 4 years down the road, there is actually a budget item to put a new peak shaving plant out by the power plant. There's a limit to how much you can actually inject into the system. It's in that 10% range. And so once you start injecting propane in where the natural gas to propane ratio is, 10 to 1, there starts to become issues with burn off, and natural gas inherently is methane. It's just a lot cleaner. Or is propane, I'm sorry. Propane is methane. It's just a lot cleaner. And so what this does is it allows us to inject it at a much cheaper price than when we buy natural gas. For example, normally natural gas in like the last 3 years has been in a $2 to $3.50 range. It's going up this winter. We sent out a notice via our webpage for customers to be aware that natural gas prices are probably going to get in the $6, $7, even $10 range this winter, which would be 4 or 5 times higher than it has been in the past. But when those natural gas prices get into what's called an SOL day, it is what it sounds like. The initials aren't the same. It's called a system overload day, but your SOL basically. There's an SOL day and then there's a critical day. They both have penalties associated with it. So if you were to use too much gas in either of those days, you are accrued penalties in the $15 to $25 range for an SOL day, and a critical day can be in the $150 range. So what happened last year was, what happened during the polar vortex was, instead of natural gas on the open market being in that $4, $5, $6 range, it was actually $150 in our area. It was in the $400 or $500 range, like in the Northeast. We inject propane. It varies based on the price of propane and on the price of natural gas. But when natural gas hits about $15 an MMBTU, that's the break-even point. You start getting into $20 or $25 an MMBTU. That's where we really start looking at injecting propane, because then there is a significant cost savings to the utility customer at $25 an MMBTU.
And this is above and beyond, didn't we just pass our for a natural gas peak system where we would start saving off more natural gas so that when we get peak, we would have it stored?
We did a CPEP contract, which is we basically lock in a price,
Okay.
and they give us a quarter off for the next 30 years. We're in 3 or 4 of those. I mean, those are no brainers. I discussed it before, but
Okay.
that's the last agreement we entered into like that.
I appreciate the work you guys are doing to try to keep our pricing down.
Any other questions? Councilman Yerger.
Not so many questions, but Troy can confirm. I'd like to enter these documents into the record, please.
Okay. Is there a second? Councilman Ellis. Cast your votes.
Council members Lightban, Supram, and Ganem, could you please cast your vote? Thank you. Motion carries 8-0 to receive, Mayor.
The reason for putting these documents into the record, I discussed these with staff, but we needed to correct the propane gas peak air shaving system modification. The document that was in our packet material made reference to the purchase of substation transformers in error. And so intending to fix that and the associated resolution, that's why you have these. It's just basically is a correction. And I think Troy was okay with what we communicated about.
Yep.
So just cleaning up the record with regards to what we're actually buying or contracting for.
Any comments from the public? Okay, Councilman Yerger.
If not, I would, and if there's no further comment by council, I would make a motion to approve resolution 2021-152 based on the amended documents that were put in the record.
I think we might want to amend first and then approve as amended.
Okay. Does that work, Travis? And
So it looks like you revised the agreement itself.
I had to change what we're actually buying. We're buying, we're not buying transformers.
So we would
we need to amend the agreement and then amend
amend the agreement, amend the resolution.
And they're both there. One's on one side
Yep.
of that, one's on the back.
Yeah, so just amend the agreement as reflected by the received exhibit. And then we'll amend the resolution.
Oh, need to do them separate. Is
Yep.
that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay. And I'm happy to make the motion to amend the agreement first off, based on the documents that were handed out to the record.
Okay, Councilman Gibson,
Second that.
cast your votes to amend the agreement.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, and now I need a motion
To
to
amend the
to amend the resolution.
resolution. Yeah.
Okay. Councilman Yerger,
Make a motion to amend the resolution to reflect the language that was handed out for the public record.
okay, is there a second? Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Councilman Yerger,
So now I would make a motion to approve resolution 2021-152, which encapsulates both documents. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
as amended, yeah.
As amended.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Item 16, a motion to deny request for change of zone from GC General Commercial to Light LI Light Industrial on property generally located at 325 County Road T, also known as Sheldon School Road. And I assume this is, we're continuing this.
Yes, we
Okay.
will. I would like to continue it, but I'd like to speak to it a little
Okay,
bit as well, if we can. So this was a request for a change of zone to light industrial from general commercial. Several years ago, a request from rural to light industrial was brought forward. At that time, the planning director was going through and making amendments to the comprehensive plan and designated this area as commercial and not industrial, and encouraged the applicant to change it to general commercial, stating that the contractor shop that they have since built there would be permitted under the general commercial district. That was incorrect. So the city kind of made a mess of all of this. So this item and the next item, we're encouraged to try and clean up the mess that we were making, or that was made, so that the use that is there and future uses, we would like to parcel off portions of the property could continue to be developed for contractor shops or contractor yards, which is the next item on the agenda, is a text change to allow that. since we were in the process of going through the comprehensive plan, the land use document will be coming forward soon, but we really hadn't reviewed it yet. I was moving forward with the thought that the text change would probably be the best way to move forward. And then as the comprehensive plan comes forward, we could clean that up. And that's how we move forward with Planning Commission. Councilman Yerger contacted me yesterday and said, gosh, wouldn't it really make sense to just go ahead and change the comprehensive plan so we can change the zoning and have it all cleaned up? And I said, yes, I think that probably would make some sense. I still think we need to have the text change move forward. We might have some tweaks to that. Councilman Yerger had some really good points about some areas that are in the definitions that should really be in the use specific language. So I think when we bring it back for second reading next week, I'll have some amendments to reflect that. And if the council is comfortable with it, I would also bring forward a change to the comprehensive plan to designate this area as light industrial or industrial. That would come at the next meeting. We would have a special meeting of the Planning Commission right before that, then a joint study session with the Planning Commission and City Council to talk with our planning consultants, and they'll be talking a lot about the future land use map then. And then the item would be on the council's agenda, so all three items could be together for you to review and have a chance to talk about and vote on. So that's kind of the plan, if you're comfortable with that, that all those three items would come back at the next meeting, so we could then move forward. Mr. Mann has asked that you waive the readings on those items so that he can move forward, so that the concrete shop that's there can actually be legal. He's really trying to do the right thing. And he does want to move forward with trying to sell some property to others. So in a nutshell, that's where we are with these couple of items. If we carry this over, we can get the ordinance prepared then, and then have the readings on it at the next meeting.
Councilman Lakeband.
So are you asking 16 and 17 to be continued? Is that your ask?
I'm asking that 16 be continued because we didn't have the ordinance with that, so we can't have the first reading of it. So if we continue that, then we can have the first reading, and then if council chooses, waive future readings on that. 17, I would ask that you go ahead and have the first reading on it, knowing that there will be a couple tweaks and amendments to it at the next meeting. And I want to thank Mr. Mann. He has been very patient with us and very, very great to work with. So thank you.
Okay, staff's recommendation on item 16 is to continue. Is there a motion to continue item 16? Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to continue item 16.
Councilman Sukram,
Well, second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 17, ordinance 5590, amending sections 11-500 and 11-900 of the UDC to define contractor yard and construction sales service and to include them in the use tables and in the agricultural, industrial, utility, transportation, and communication use standards. First reading.
So this is the piece currently in the code, the use specific standards has a section on construction, sales, and services, but it's not listed as a use at all in any of our land use tables. So it's not designated as a permitted or limited or conditional use in any district. So what this does is it adds it as a use in some of those districts. It adds to some of the use specific areas, and then it also creates definitions. And as I spoke with Councilman Yerger, he did point out that there are a couple areas in the definition where he thought it would be better to move those up to the use specific requirements, and I'm fine, I agree with that. He had some concern about having contractor services as a limited use in the general commercial district. I think perhaps as we tweak the language, maybe it's a conditional use, maybe it's not a use. We can certainly discuss that at our next meeting. And as I said, I'll bring forward some amendments and we'll be able to talk about those in more depth.
Councilman Legman.
Yeah, my only question then is House Levine is doing the UDC stuff. Have they looked at this and do they have recommendations?
I have talked to them. I don't think at this point that they have any serious concerns or qualms about it. I will be talking with them again later this week. And
Okay.
so we're working pretty closely
Yes, so
together.
I'm totally okay with this, but then I don't want them to come in and say, oh, we need to
Right.
change it all.
Yeah, and in this particular area and some other areas, just so, you know, as we're looking at different land uses, one of the things we're looking at in the future is maybe a heavy commercial use that's between a general commercial and light industrial. You know, general commercial is really the 23rd Street corridor. This particular area doesn't make sense in the future, a few months down the road when we're looking at the comp plan. You know, you don't want to have a Wendy's there or a, you know, a retail store or something, and yet you don't necessarily want manufacturing here either. So if we do move forward with that type of a use, we would make sure that it's well-defined in the comp plan so that the uses that are there don't become non-conforming uses, so that they can continue to expand in a way that we're setting it up right now, and then also address it in those sections of the UDC.
Questions for Jennifer? Councilman Yerger.
Not so much questions because we spent quite a bit of time on the phone. I just want
did.
to say, in regards to this topic, I want to applaud Mr. Mann for bringing this issue to the city with regards to the necessary requirements to get his zoning straightened up. He didn't have to do that. He did. He's been working diligently to make this correct so that he's legal and the other things that the city's doing is legal. And so I applaud him for that. Also, I'd like to compliment Jennifer for discussing and working through some compromise on how do we address this and how do we address it most efficiently to satisfy the needs of Mr. Mann and his business and take into account the needs of the citizens of Fremont across the entire city when we're making UDC code changes, because some of the changes you make affect general commercial, and that's all over the city. And so we have to have care and caution as to how we approach those. And so I just want to go on record as we've had quite a bit of discussion about, and Jennifer's already mentioned them. There's some things in the glossary. There's some things in the tables. There's some things in the narrative under how we would get this all affected that do need to get adjusted, which gives me a little pause about approving first reading, but knowing that we're headed to incorporate those things, and we've mutually agreed that's our goal. And this has been discussed with the applicant as well. So trying to take all of those needs and balance them with the needs of the citizenry for protection of the other properties surrounding these. I just wanted to applaud staff for doing that. I thought it was, we had good dialogue in the last day or so. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? If none, I'd take a motion to hold first reading. Councilman Legman,
Make a motion to hold first reading of ordinance 55 and 90.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit B of Ordinance 5427, specifically portions of the UDC Chapter 11 zoning subdivision and site development, Exhibit B, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
Take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Gibson,
So moved.
Councilman Jensen. Cast your votes.